In this video, you're going to learn how to build a reviews application on Bubble completely without code. And I want you to think about some of the more popular platforms that offer this type of functionality. Yelp, TripAdvisor, Google Business Reviews, Amazon Product Reviews. These all have a lot of common functionality when it comes to reviews, like providing star ratings, flagging reviews, filtering listings, whether they're products or services, by the ratings that have been given, and a lot of other features as well. But it's not enough to know what you're going to put in this type of application, but it's really important to understand how you're going to accomplish this if you're building it from scratch. So that's exactly what we want you to walk away from with this video feeling confident in. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to go through an overview first of our demo application, and then we'll dig into the details. Okay, so we're going to take a look at our demo application here just from a high level. This first page, this first screen that we're looking at is our search page. So here is basically where we can see all of the different listings that users can go in and review. We do have some filtering functionality, so I can filter by anything that has at least 4 stars or above. I can also filter things down further by using keyword searches. So if I type in the word mug, it knocked one of those out. I can also reset. There's a lot of different filtering capabilities that you can apply here, but we're going to work with these two because they're one of the most common when we're looking through products or services that have ratings. And then if I go into one of these listings, I'm going to click on this title here. Now we're looking at just the detail page of the listing itself. So we have a larger image, the title, description, and all the information about the ratings. Remember, this application is focused on the ratings itself. So we want to really highlight, the average rating, the distribution of each individual star rating. Down below, we have the ratings themselves where users can put in a comment to provide a review. They also have an option to upload an image. If it's a product or something that they're purchasing, they can show what they got specifically. We have some dates here. We have the ability to flag reviews if we find that there's spam, right? The community can kind of help each other out there. And we also have the ability for the owner of the product or service to provide a reply to any one of these comments here. Okay, so this is kind of the star of the show, is getting to the point where all of this information is coming together to help users understand how well rated this product or service is. Okay, now I'm going to go into my listings here. I'm currently logged in as a user, Ross at sample.com. We can see up in the corner there. So this is where I can manage anything that I want to put in the directory or the marketplace, whatever it is, so that it can then be rated on. So here I have 3 listings, 3 different mugs. I also have a snapshot of what the current rating is, how many reviews have been given for it. And you can see within this page, I can actually toggle between 2 different views. The list of my listings that I've posted and also all of the reviews that have come in for every single one of my listings. So this is sort of a dashboard kind of control center for me to manage things. If I want to provide owner replies to each individual review, I can do that, right? I can click this icon here and submit a reply. I can also review any flags that came in for a review. Maybe I disagree with it and I can remove the flag so that the review can then be made public again, right? So there's a lot of different things that I, as the owner of the listing, can do. Of course, I can also filter things down if I have a lot of listings and a lot of reviews are coming in to make things easier for me to find, right? Filter things down by their status, things like that. And of course, I can manage the listing itself when I'm creating something new or editing to modify the title, description, and image. We're going to keep this part really simple here. I mean, there's obviously a lot of different details that you can add to something that's being listed. Again, our focus right now is really the rating system and managing reviews on both ends from a consumer perspective and also an owner perspective. Now, because these reviews are being provided by people, we also have a simple profile system. So let's go back to this holiday mug detail page here. Let's say I'm interested in other listings that Joey may have reviewed or listings that Joey may have in the marketplace or the directory. So I'm going to click on Joey's name and so I'm going to be taken to Joey's profile. So I can see Joey has 4 listings here, all kiteboard related. And then 2 reviews that Joey has submitted. So it's a nice way to kind of build a bit more of a community. If I'm coming from a listing page, I can get to other people's profiles, or I can go and view my own profile. So I'm currently logged in as Ross, and I can see what other people would see for me. Okay. And then we also have a basic account system for a user to update their avatar, their display name that shows with the ratings, edit any, login information. We won't spend too much time on this here in this demonstration, but this is part of an overall application, so we need to make sure these details are also taken care of. All right, so those are the core features that we're going to stay focused on in this video, and you'll definitely have other functionality that you'll be adding in for your own use cases, but this is going to be a really good foundation for you so that you can scale really well, once you have a lot of listings in place and a high volume of activity from your users. So the first place you want to start with is the database structure. This is where you want to start no matter what type of app you're building, because it has such a huge influence on how your design comes together and also all of the workflow logic. So we're going to jump right in now into the database architecture of our demo app so you can see what you want to start with. Here's the data structure that we have in place for this application. We're working with 4 different data types, and this includes the built-in user data type that comes with every app. And we're also working with 3 different option sets to help us with some lists of choices. So the user data type is very basic. We have an image field for the avatar or the profile picture for the user. That way it can show up in the profile page, and also when we're looking at people's reviews. We have their display name. This could be a username. It could be something that's a little bit more anonymous. It doesn't have to be their real name. We also have a relationship between the user and all of the listings that they've created. So a list of listings here. Whenever you create a list field, you want to make sure that you check this box so that Bubble knows that this field can accept multiple values. And then we also have a similar field here to relate the user to all of the reviews that they've submitted. These little shortcut fields are exactly that. That's how I want you to see them. They're sort of shortcuts so that you can reduce the number of searches you're doing in your logic, and have a much more efficient, a little easier pathway to get to those items. Now, with that said, there are definitely cases where a list can sort of work against you if your application has a situation where these lists could be really, really, really big, lots of items in the list. Then it's going to start to work against you. The performance of the list will not be as good because the size of the individual record will be much, much bigger, much heavier. So in that case, you might be actually better off just doing a straight search in your logic when you're looking for listings created by a user, for example. Okay, so definitely a balance you'll have to see there to understand what's going to make the most sense for your app. All right, now let's go over to the listing data type next, because we can't do reviews until we have listings. So this is just the thing that we want to review or rate. So this could be a product, it could be a service. Here we have a number field for our average rating. This is something that we will recalculate every single time there is a new review provided, or anytime a flag has been added or removed to the listing. I do see this as another shortcut type of field so that we always have this number calculated for us. That way, we're not asking Bubble to constantly be calculating this number every time somebody opens up the listing page or is even looking at it within search results. So we're really trying to reduce the number of calculations that have to happen all the time. So here we have a text field for the description, an image field for the photo of the listing, and then very similar to kind of having this calculated value done for us for rating, we're going to do the same thing for the review count. It's simply the number of review records that exist in our database for this particular listing, because we're displaying that here everywhere, right? Here's the average rating, and then here is the number of reviews provided. So imagine if you have a lot of users going through your directory and you're constantly seeing, this big table of items showing up, and every individual one has to have this average calculated and the count found, and then of course you go into the detail page and those things show up again. You're constantly asking Bubble to do those calculations. So these 2 fields will help us reduce that significantly. Okay, and then of course we have our primary title for the listing itself. Okay, now moving over to the review data type. This is really the star of the entire application. This is what our users are creating for the listings, and we're calculating on so that we can understand how great of a product or service something might be. So a review is going to have the actual text comment. Okay, so let me open up our holiday mug example here. So we're talking about the actual written review that the user wants to provide. It's that text. Then optionally, the owner can provide a reply. And we're only going to allow for one reply. We're not going to create any kind of conversation thread situation here. So you see this example right here. Phoebe wrote in this review, and then the owner wrote in this quick little thank you. So this text here is being saved to this field here. Then we have an optional photo field for the review. So if the user wanted to provide some more context for their review, they can upload a picture. They certainly don't have to. You'll notice that any reviews that don't have an image, we've got a placeholder icon there that shows instead, so that we don't just see empty white space. Then we have the actual rating for the individual review. Remember, you want to look at this from the perspective of one review at a time. Okay, so this is one person's rating. So they'll either provide a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. In our demo application, we're doing a 5-star system. We're not doing half stars or anything like that. So you can, of course, implement that if you want. But that's the range of numbers that we would expect to see here in this field. If there is a flag on the review, we're going to create that as a separate record because we're going to have some separate details there. And if that's the case, we'll have a relationship between the review and the flag. We'll take a look at that data type in a moment. Of course, we want to have the relationship to the listing that we are reviewing. Otherwise, we wouldn't know, what it is that the rating is for. And then we also have a reply date for the owner replies so that we could, if we wanted, I don't actually have it here in my demo, but I could display the date that the owner submitted that reply. Okay, that could also tell us a little bit about how responsive the owner is, for example. And then we have the status of the review. So this is our first option set that we're encountering here. If I go over to the option sets tab, go to the review status, these are my 3 possible statuses. Now, I just made these up, right? This is for my demonstration. You may decide to have different status options involved. So the possible choices that we have here are flagged, right? The review could be flagged. It could be published, and this implies without an owner reply, or it can be published with a reply. And the reason I've separated these two is just to make it easier for the owner when they're managing their list of reviews, right? So if I go into my listings, again, I'm logged in as Ross here. I go into manage reviews. It can be a lot easier for me to find, okay, I've already responded to these 2. If I go to just the published ones, makes it a lot easier for me to just run through the ones that I haven't responded to if it's important for me to reply to every single one that comes in. Okay, and then of course we have the flagged, which is also helpful to isolate because this has a little bit of extra functionality where I can review what the submitted flag reason was. I can remove it if I want. Okay, so those are the 3 status choices. So every review is going to be one of these 3 statuses. And when you're creating these fields and you're choosing these formats, all you need to do is select the field type and you're going to see all of your possible options. They can be option sets, they can be relationships to other data types, or they can be generic values like text, number, dates. Okay, and our final data type here is the flag. So we separated this out into its own data type because we have 3 different properties for it. We have the flag reason, which is one of our other option sets. Okay, and this is, again, just examples of what I have created here. You can, of course, have many others. So spam, inappropriate content, things like that. And then if they chose other, because we did have that as an option, then we are offering them another text input to type in more detail what their reasoning was if it didn't fit within one of these choices here. Of course, the flag has a related review relationship as well, so we know what is being reviewed. And I'll show you real quick what the flagging system looks like from the user's perspective. So let me go into this wetsuit. So I'm Ross. And here you can see, I mean, obviously I've provided a review, so I can't flag my own review. However, I can delete my review, but I can flag Monica's if I wanted. So there's this flag here that shows up. I click on it, a pop-up will show. It'll remind me what the content is, and I can choose a reason for my flag and submit it, and that will create the record. Or if I choose other, you'll see this input show up here. And again, this will create the record and save all of these details. Okay, so let's go back into the database here. The only other option set that we have is the star rating. Now, we're not actually using this as a relationship with our other data types, but rather this is going to help us with our star design. So if we go over here to this view, we're getting the help of the option set to create this star system here to display things really dynamically and make it a lot easier for us behind the scenes to manage this design. I mean, this is a custom design where we're using a repeating group to generate the stars for us. It really also helps with the searching as well. When we want to filter by minimum rating, we're taking advantage of this option set. So all this is 5 choices, 1 for each star. And because the display of the choice is technically seen as a text, I do have a custom attribute here for the choice to translate that to a numerical value. That way I can do a little bit of math, number comparisons for those filters. So for example, if I open up the attributes for my option number 1, then the number here is going to be number 1. Very, it's all the same, right? 2 and 2, 3 and 3, and so forth. So when we go into the design portion of this video and the logic for the filters, you'll see where this comes into play. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, take a look at our free extended workshop over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, where we'll guide you through our 4-phased approach for going from idea to app. So if you're looking for a complete start to finish guide, you're going to love this workshop. The link is on the screen right now and in the description below. Okay, so now that you have your data structure in place, we're going to move into the page designs area of the editor. Now we can actually reference our data structure in our designs so that we can display things dynamically. You can see why we move in this order. You're also going to see in our demo app that we've set everything up in a multi-page structure. We decided that this was the best approach for this type of app so that we can more easily manage things in separate spaces. So an area for a user to manage all of the listings that they want to create, a separate area for the listing detail page, right? Highly dynamic there, another area for search, and so on. So we're going to jump in now into our editor again, into the design canvas to see all of our visual components and how we set them up. So opening up my page drop-down list, I'm going to go through the pages that we have here. This is a multi-page structure, okay? So our index page, which is built into every Bubble application, this is where we're going to have our login and sign up forms so that we can register users, get them logged into the app. Very straightforward and standard. Then we have an account page, which is where the user can modify their login credentials. They can add in their display name and avatar. We don't have too much going on here, but this is where they can manage anything related to their account, their user account for the app. If you want to have billing information here, this would be a great place for that. Then we have our listing page. This is the dynamic detail page for an individual listing. Okay, so we see the photo, the title, all the details about the ratings, and of course the list of reviews down below. Then we have the My Listings page, which is, you can see this as sort of the owner's dashboard. And if I go into the front end, I'm going to show you that this one page actually has several different views that the user can toggle between. So the first one, the default here, is looking at all of the listings that they've created. Okay, I can create a new listing. So we have a blank form here. Or I can manage an existing listing. So we see the same form, but now it's pre-populated with some information. Or I can go over to view all of the reviews that are coming in for my listings. Okay, so that's 3 views technically, and the form here has sort of 2 different modes that we can be in. Either there is data or there isn't, when we're creating a new record. But all of those different screens are happening on one single page. So it's sort of functioning like a single page structure here, but it makes it nice and convenient for the owner. Okay. Then we have the search page, which structurally is very simple. There's not a lot going on here because you're going to see that we have a bunch of reusable elements embedded on a lot of these screens. But this is really just kind of the search and filter inputs and functions here, plus the table of all of the listings. So this would be ideally a public facing page for the users to go through and find things that they want to rate. Okay. And then we have a user profile page, which structurally is very similar to the listing detail page, because this is another dynamic one where when you navigate to this page, you're going to reference a specific record. On the listing page, it's a listing. On this page, it's a specific user. Okay, whether it is the current user looking at their own profile or looking at a different user's profile, we have to send a user record to it so that we can see their photo, their name, and then all of the details attached to that profile. So their listings and their reviews. This page also has kind of 2 different view modes. Let me go over here to the My Profile. Similar to the owner's dashboard area, right? I can switch between these 2 different screens. And, we're doing these sort of tabbed like structures to make it really easy for the user to consume things without being too overwhelmed. We don't necessarily want to show everything all at once for them. Okay, so that's overall the page structure of this application that we're going to be working with. Now, we do have 2 reusable elements that are embedded, right? We've got instances of these elements on multiple pages because we want to see the list of listings in many different places. We want to see the list of reviews in many different places. So reusable element is a perfect use case for this. So for our listings table, right, this is just a table element here within the reusable. That's really all the reusable is. And that way we can add an instance of it here, right, on the user profile. We can see it on the My Listings page right here, same element. Okay, we can also see it on the search page, of course. This is sort of the main event of the search page is the list of listings. We're not having to rebuild these designs from scratch on every single page. It saves us a lot of work behind the scenes and also makes things much more consistent. It reduces errors for us. And you can create conditions so that maybe on one page you see some details, whereas on another page you hide those details so that it actually makes sense for the context of the page. And then we have the exact same concept here for the reviews, because we are going to see the table of reviews in a few different places. All right, so there is the overall page structure with also our reusable elements. You'll notice that we also have a reusable for the header, so that this shows up on every single page for global navigation. So let's dig into the details a little bit more here for the design, and we're going to start with the My Listings page. I'll take you through the navigation system first of how we toggle between all of these different views on this screen. So we're using a custom state for this. My custom state is essentially keeping track of a value so that I can make certain groups visible or not visible, based on what the value is. So on this page called My Listings, I have a primary container called group main. If you followed along with any of our other walkthroughs, you'll see that I always have this on, majority of my demo pages is a first container that helps me with spacing at the page level, margins, and things like that. This is typically where I have my custom states. It just makes it really easy for me to remember where they are. So if I open up the inspector here for group main, here I can see my custom state called tab. We'll talk about this other one a little bit later when we go into workflows, but tab has a default value of the word listings. It's just a text, and I've just typed this in here because I want the first view when the user loads this page to be the listings screen right here. Okay, so what does this mean when the default value is listings, or when the value in general is listings? Well, that means that my listings design is going to be visible. Okay, so you can see down here in my elements tree, I have 3 different groups that we can switch between: My Listings, Edit, and Reviews. So if we go to the My Listings group, under the Layout tab, we can see that by default, it's not visible on page load. All 3 of these are like that. They're all hidden to start. But the condition on the group makes it visible based on the custom state value. So for this group, if the group mains tab is listings, which again, I've just typed in, then that makes this visible. If we go to the Edit, you can see it's visible under a different value, the word edit. For reviews, under the word review. So only one of these can ever be visible at a time, because the value of the tab custom state can only be one of these 3 words at a time. All right, so by default it's listings, so we'll automatically see this group here. I'll turn this on to display. You can see here it's the reusable element that is added to the screen. The only additional items on this page are the title of this group, and then also this button here, which will take me into my edit view. Okay, so if I were to click on create a new listing, let's go to the workflow real quick here. All this is doing is setting the state. It's changing the state value from what would be listings over to the word edit. And what that means is now the condition on the My Listings group fails, and so it hides the group. And then instead, the condition on the edit group passes and it becomes visible. And if I wanted to jump back into the listings view from here, I actually have a few different ways of doing that depending on the pathway the user takes. So I can just click on this button up at the top, sort of in a way to discard changes. So if I click on manage listings, it's going to change the state value again to the word listings. It's also going to reset the group so that I clear out any changes that I don't actually want to keep, things like that. I can also save the listing and it'll take me automatically back to the main listings view. So my save button, I actually have 2 different versions for this, one for creating the record, one for editing. Again, we'll jump into these other workflow actions a little bit later in this video, but I do want to point out that there is a set state action as a part of the save flow to change that tab value back to listings. And over here, same thing, change the tab value back to listings. It just makes it so that, we kind of guide the user along for them. So if I had made an adjustment here and I click on save, you're going to see it takes me right back to this screen here. Okay, and all of these other navigation buttons, right? If I go to manage reviews over here, it's going to change the state to the word review. So this is really our navigation driver. Now let's take a closer look at the edit form, which we're using for both creating and editing details. So very simple. I just have a couple of inputs here, a single line for the title, a multi-line for the description, and then a picture uploader to add an image. Okay, we also have some text elements to help label them. You'll also notice that there are some initial contents for these here. Okay, so I'm actually populating, referencing the parent group's listings title, the description, and the featured photo. That will only matter when we're editing something. If we're creating something, there's not going to be a reference to an existing record, and so these expressions will evaluate to blank values. Therefore, we have, an empty form like this. But when we go into the workflows, you're going to see how, when I click on manage, I'm actually passing data over so that it can populate with that specific record. If I come back here, go to another record, right, it's dynamic and it will change that data source so we can see the right information showing. Our reviews group, very similar to my listings, it's mainly just the reusable element to display the reviews list, right, the reviews table, with a couple of filter inputs outside of that so that we can influence the list of reviews. Because this is a reusable element that can show up on multiple pages, we're actually going to be able to pass information into the reusable. That way, again, we can influence what we want to see based on the page that we're on. Okay, so I'm actually now going to jump into the structure of those reusables because they do show up in a lot of our pages and they are kind of the center of the design for this entire application. So let's start with the listings table. I'm going to go into the reusable here. The only thing I have in this reusable is this table. The reusable itself is a group. Okay, you can choose the format, the container format for this. This is a regular group. Okay, now you'll see here that I have 3 properties for this reusable. This is at the reusable level, not at the table level. I have a property for the owner. Okay, so this is going to be a dynamic value where the field type is user, and I've just given the property a name of owner. And this is optional because with some instances of this table, I don't want to filter the listings by a specific owner, but in another instance, such as the user profile, I do want to be able to filter it. So I need to pass information into the reusable so that I can affect the data source of the table. Same thing for the rating filter and same thing for the keyword filter. These two are key for the search page. Okay, so the rating filter is a number. It's also optional because we're not going to filter it on, for example, the user profile. Same thing for the keyword. This is just a regular text. Okay, so those are 3 properties. So now if I go at the table level, here's the structure of the data source. Type of content is listing. The data source is a search for listings. And here we can add constraints that reference those 3 different properties at the reusable element level. And I want to point out that at the very bottom of this window here, we have this checkbox checked to ignore empty constraints, because if the property at the reusable level is empty, or the user just decides they don't want to filter anything, right? So they're choosing not to add in a rating filter, for example, the constraint is going to be ignored. Okay, that's what this checkbox allows us to do. If the expression is empty, then it's as if the constraint isn't even there. So if there's no rating filter, then it's as if the only constraints we have are the creator and the keyword. So the results that we get are going to be more logical for the user. They'll have a more open search in that case. Okay, so my 3 constraints here are average rating for the listing, the list of listings that we want to return here in the table has to be greater than or equal to whatever the rating filter the user selected. So just as a reminder, here under search, if I say I want to see anything that's 3 stars or above, it's going to pass in that 3-star rating into the reusable so that the only listings we see are the ones where their average rating is greater than or equal to 3. Okay, this is a reference to that property. So I get to the reusable, and then I can find from my properties here, the rating filter, and I know that's a number, so this is a compatible expression here. Created by, right, the creator of the listing, person who created the record, that has to equal the listing table's owner. That's another property. And again, for the search page, we're not actually filtering on an owner, so that's a constraint that would be empty on this screen specifically. On the My Profile page, this is going to be filtered by the owner, by the person whose profile we're looking at. Okay, and I'll show you how we pass in that information. Right now I'm just kind of going through the receiving of that info and how it affects this table. And then similarly, we have the title contains keywords. We reference the keyword text there. I'm sorting by title in this case. I could sort by the average rating if I wanted, so that the highest rating is always at the top, or you could sort by the most recently updated. That part's up to you for sure. Okay, now within the table, this is just a matter of design, right? So we have different columns set up for our photo. This is an image element to display the rows listing photo. We have several kind of different groupings here to create the layout that we want. This is going to show the average rating. I have this formatted as a specific number with 1 decimal place. Here I have a repeating group to display my stars, right? And this is where we actually reference that third option set we talked about for the star rating. So notice that I don't actually have 5 individual star icons. I'm using a repeating group where it is a fixed number of rows and columns because I know there's only ever going to be 5 stars to display. And the data source is my option set. And I know that my choices, there's only 5 of them. So, 1 cell per choice. Inside the 1 cell, all I need to do is design the icon I want to display. By default, it'll be this gray outline star. Now, the condition on this star is to color and fill in the star if the cell's star is less than or equal to the average rating of the listing. Okay, so this isn't based on the filter, but instead based on the data for the particular listing. So if I go into my actual database here, we can see that we have these average rating numbers saved, right? So this particular lavender mug here has an average rating of 5 stars. Holiday mug has an average rating of 4. So for every individual row, right, which is like this, I want to be able to automatically show through my star design what that average rating is. I'm also showing it as a plain text here right next to it. But just for the purposes of the design of this here, what we're going to do is going to say if the cell's star ratings number, that's that numerical attribute with the option set, right? Because this is the list of option set choices. So if this cell's choices number is less than or equal to the listing's average rating, and we're talking about the rows listing. Okay, you're seeing here this reference to group listing. We're talking about, let's see here, this is going to highlight, yeah, the group that has this entire design here. Okay, this is referencing the rows listing. We're just passing that information in. So if it's less than the rows listing's average rating, then we know to fill in that star. Okay, so if this listing has a star rating of 3, then we know that 1, 2, and 3 meet this condition and will all be filled in. Okay, the only other thing to point out here is that this title is going to be underlined whenever we hover over it so that the user knows that they can click on it here to trigger a workflow and take them over to the listing detail page. Okay, so now what I want to show you is on the pages where we've added the instances of this reusable, how you pass information in. So we'll start here with our user profile. We actually got both reusable elements. So for the listings table, which we've just been looking at, here's the instance of it, okay? So this is also working. This page has that custom state system as well, very similar to the My Listings. I'm either looking at the listings view or the reviews view. So I have another tab custom state here. But under the appearance tab of the reusable element, you'll see there are my 3 properties, okay? And I'm only using one of the properties. All 3 of these are optional, so Bubble's not going to yell at me for leaving anything blank because I made them optional. So the owner in this case, we do want to force for the table constraints because we're on the user profile page. I only care to see the listings for the current page's user. Okay, this profile page, it's really important for the type of content to be set to user that allows us to reference different users whenever we navigate to it. Okay, so when we say current pages user, we're talking about the user in question. We are not talking about the current user. The current user is just the person who's logged in looking at the page. We want to talk about a specific selected user's profile. So it's very different, and be very careful not to mix these two up here. Okay, so again, the filter for the owner of listings that we want to see here is going to be the current pages user. Now, if we go over to the search page, okay, where we also have an instance of this reusable here, notice that we're not filtering on the owner, but we are filtering on the other 2 things. Okay, so I have my keyword filter, which is just coming in from this input, and then I also have my, my rating here that the user has selected. And we're actually using a custom state to sort of create a custom interactive design here. So I'll explain how this came together. This is another reusable, another repeating group, same structure, right? 1 row, 5 columns. It's pulling from our option set. And in the cell, we have our star. Now, when the user clicks on this star here, we're going to basically save their selection to a custom state here called selected. And the custom state is going to live on the repeating group. Okay, so I'm going to back up a couple steps here. Let's go back to the repeating group, over to the inspector. We have a custom state here called selected. This is going to point to our option set. So if they choose the first star in the first cell, the selected is, star number 1. If they choose the third star, it's star number 3. It's just keeping track of what the user has chosen. So when they click, it'll set that state to the current cell's star rating. If they click on it again and we can see that the selected is already that star, then all we're doing is clearing the state. So we get something like, I'm going to show you here. So if I click on 3 and then click on 3 again, it just clears it out. Just a little convenient factor there for the user. And the design of this star is we'll fill it in if the cell star is less than or equal to the selected star, right? So if I choose 3, I not only want to fill in and color 3, but I also want to fill in 1 and 2 as well, because it makes more sense for the user to understand that I am filtering by a minimum rating of 3 stars. So I want to see anything that is at least 3 stars or above. Okay, for the context of this application, that's how we want to design those conditions. Okay, and then the other place where we see our reusable element for the listings is going to be on the My Listings page. Over here, it's that default first view. And if we look at the filters here for the properties, we are only passing in an owner. And notice that the owner here is the current user, right? We don't have a current page user because that's not how this page is set up, unlike the user profile. When I'm on My Listings, I only want to see my listings, right? I am the current user. Okay, so we have very similar concept for the reusable element with the reviews. So I'm going to switch over here to this other element, and we're going to look at the property here. So the only property that I have this on this reusable is a review list. Okay, this is our first list property. So I've just checked this box, very similar to setting up a field in your data structure. This is a dynamic value, and that is going to point to our review data type, okay, review list. The reason that we're going to have this list here is because our table isn't going to perform a search of its own. It's actually just going to come in from that list at that property level. The reason we're not having this table perform a search of its own is because this list is going to be a lot more dynamic when new reviews are created, because ratings will update, and we also have flags that may influence the list. So we're taking a slightly different approach to providing the data source. So this is going to be more dynamic here, coming from the page it lives on. So for example, if we go to the listing page, where most people would see reviews for a listing, here you can see this is where we perform the search. We search for reviews based on the listing of this page. So you see here we have current pages listing. The listing page, similar to the user profile, has a type of content set. You can sort of see this page as the profile page of a listing. If you look at it that way, it's very similar in structure to a user profile. Okay, so the type of content is listing. So we're searching for reviews. This is on the reusable, where the related listing for that review equals the current page's listing. And we specifically only want to show reviews that do not have a flag status. So they're fully published reviews, whether they have an owner's reply or not, right? So if we go over to Holiday Mug here, this is the list that we're looking at. There is one flagged review, but it's being filtered out right now based on that search. Okay, so then if we go over to the My Listings page and go over to our reviews group, okay, so these are all of the reviews that are coming in for any listing the current user has created. Okay, so here's the reusable. Here's our search. It's a little different. Okay, related listing is going to equal whatever listing the user has selected from this drop down out here. Okay, this is another reason why we want to have this search happening outside. It just makes it easier to pass in constraints. And as long as the listing for the review is within any listing that the user has created, that's one that we care about, right? We don't want to see other people's listings review here. And then the status is something that's also going to be influenced by this dropdown. Notice that, again, we have this checkbox checked so that if the user decides not to filter on the status or the listing, they're going to see everything together in one table. So it's up to the user kind of how they want to change their view. And we also have a sorting here, which you can modify as well. And then the third place where we have this reusable element is back on the user profile. It's the other instance here. So we already looked at the listings table, so here's the review, and you can see for this data source, we're searching by the creator being the current page user, and then also not flagged. Again, the flagged ones should only be visible to the owner of the listing. Now, digging into the reusable here for the reviews table, the main thing I want to point out are all of these different conditional elements, because this table shows up on different screens, and so different elements are going to be relevant to different people and what their relationships are to not just the listing, but also the review itself. So for example, if I'm the owner of a listing, I want to be able to provide a reply for any reviews that are coming in. So we have, for example, this icon here, which has some conditions to make it visible. We also have a condition to change the icon slightly to fill it in when there is a reply saved to the record. So for example, here we can see this arrow if the current row's reviews, related listings, creator is the current user, right? If I'm the owner of the listing for this review. And specifically if the page that we're on is the My Listings page. So current page name is, and then I've just typed in My Listings. We've got to make sure if you're going off of page names that you match exactly how you have named the page within the structure of your app. If you ever change the name of the page and you have conditions based off of that, you got to make sure that you update those. Okay, so this is just an example of a conditional element that, you know, you can show and hide no matter, you know, even if we're in a reusable, there are things that can still be different across the different instances of them. So here's another example with the trash can icon. This should only be visible to the creator of the review itself. Only I should be able to delete my own review. The owner of the listing shouldn't be able to do it. Other people shouldn't be able to do it, right? So if you have conditionally visible stuff, just make sure that by default they're hidden. They collapse when hidden. Typically, you're going to want that behavior. And then you create the scenario in which they should be visible. Same thing for the images, right? If there is no photo, then we're going to show this icon. But if there is a photo, then we're going to show the picture itself. All right, we also have our button here to submit if we are the owner. The group itself should only be visible if there is a reply. Okay, so all of these different conditional things, that's how you want to manage within your reusable element. Now we're going to take a closer look at the rating distribution design that we have here on the listing page, because this has really been custom configured here with progress bars and a repeating group, and we've got some logic in here to make sure that the level of progress that has been filled in is actually accurate according to the number of ratings and what those different scores are. Okay, so here's how we've put this together. This is a repeating group that I've called RG Ratings Breakdown. The type of content is our star rating, right? Because for every bar, that represents a different possible rating, 1 through 5. And you can see that I've actually reversed the rows and columns compared to our star designs. Now we have 5 rows, but 1 column. This way they essentially stack vertically. And I'm also intentionally sorting in a descending order by number so that 5 is at the top. Okay. Now inside of the cell, I have a group here. It'll continue to reference the cell star rating, right? So this first cell is going to be for rating number 5. I have a text to display that actual number, and then I have a progress bar. So this is coming from a plugin. It's a free Bubble plugin called Progress Bar. Very basic, gets us exactly what we want here for this display. So I've added that element, that plugin element here to the screen. I've also been very intentional with the widths, so you can play with the dimensions for how big and small you want this design. But the real secret here is the value of the percentage. That's what tells the plugin element to, you know, how far down the progress bar it needs to fill in. So for example, for star rating 5, I want to count up the number of ratings for this listing that had a rating of 5 out of the total number of ratings altogether, and then convert that into a percentage, right? Because that division is going to give us a decimal, then we need to multiply by 100 to give us a whole percentage. So, you know, 10%, 50%, things like that. So here's my logic. I'm searching for reviews for this listing and specifically for this rating number, right? It's the parent group star rating or the cell's rating. So if we're in the first cell, this is cell number 5. I'm going to count up how many number 5s there were, right? In the second cell, it'll count up how many number 4s there were. And then I'm going to divide by the total number of reviews there are, which we actually have a reference to with our reusable element here. This is another reason why we have the property here to provide the review list it's structured in this way. It's so that we can actually access that list from outside of the reusable element, right? Again, all of this is to reduce the number of times we're having to search and calculate things throughout the entire application. So if we already have that work done for us and we can reference them in multiple places, that's a great efficiency tactic there. So I'm going to count up that list. Okay, this is that property. And then I'm going to multiply by 100 because this initial division is going to give us a decimal, like I said. Multiply by 100, we get our whole percentage, which is what the progress bar is looking for. I'll show you a simpler example here. Let's go over to, I believe, yes, the silver kiteboard, which only has one rating of 3. And so you can see 100% of the ratings, which is only 1, is a rating of 3. That way this fills in all the way, and then all of the rest are not filled in. I mean, they are a little bit. That's just to kind of show you that there is a progress bar there. But this is the logic that we've implemented, so it really helps the user understand the distribution of ratings. All right, so you've got your data structure in place, you got your page layouts going. Now it's time to take a look at the logic component of your application. So we're going to dig into the workflows that we've put together here for our features. We'll talk about some of the decisions that went into them as well, why we went one way versus another in terms of performance and efficiency and things like that, because with workflows, it does require a lot of strategy. There are many ways to accomplish a lot of different things, and you really need to take into account the big picture. So as you're watching our walkthrough here, keep in mind that every app is different. You may need to implement some of these features slightly differently. That's okay, but use this as a guide, okay? So we're gonna jump in now into the workflows of our app. The first workflow we're gonna look at is creating a new listing or just saving updates to an existing listing. So when I click on this button here, I'm not modifying the database in any way. I'm just changing the view to go over to this form. But the save button has kind of a dual function. We're either creating a new record for the first time, or if I'm coming from a manage situation here, right, in edit mode, then I'm going to modify the existing records details to update these values. So that save button has two different workflows here, and the difference between them that'll tell Bubble which one to run is the condition that says only when the parent group's listing is empty, okay, then we're going to create the new listing, versus only when the parent group's listing is not empty, then we know to modify that existing. So parent group's listing is referring to the edit group itself. Anytime we navigate to this group, we have the option of giving it a data source. So we're not going to have a data source there when we're creating, but we will when we're editing. All right, so we'll talk about that navigation to past data here in just a moment, but let's look at the save workflows. So creating a new listing is going to create a new record. We're going to capture our 3 different inputs to map them to the 3 appropriate fields in the database. We're also going to modify the user. Okay, so we're doing a make a change action to the current user to add that brand new listing to the user's list of listings. Remember, the user data type has these 2 list fields here. Anytime they create a new listing or a new review, we're going to keep track of that. We'll have that record in that table, but then we'll add it to this user's list. Okay, so that's exactly what we're doing here with the listings field. We're going to add the result of step 1. Then we're just going to have some visual changes to let the user know that everything was successful. So we'll reset the group that has the form. Then we'll change the view back to our listings view with that custom state, and we're going to show a little alert message. Okay, so there's the creation. Then for modifying, very similar, except we're not creating anything. We're going to make a change to the parent group's listing, and we're going to modify the description and the title. Now for the second step, we have an optional make a change action specifically for the photo, because whenever you upload a file to your application, that file is technically going to be saved to the file manager of your app, and you do have a limited amount of storage capacity based on the plan that you're on. So if the user is replacing a photo, we want to make sure that the previous photo is fully deleted from the file manager so that you can get that space back. So here's how this is being managed. Whenever the picture uploader is changed, okay, that itself is going to trigger a workflow. This is before the user even hits save. So that workflow is over here. When the picture uploader is changed and the value is not empty, and we can see that the listing already has a photo saved to the record, right? So this is only in the event that we are replacing a picture, not if it's the first time a photo is being uploaded. Then the first action that's going to happen is we're going to first delete the previous photo. So this is a specific data action called delete an uploaded file. Okay, that's what we have right here. And we're going to reference whatever featured photo is currently saved to the record so that it's fully deleted from the application's file manager. Then we're going to set a state On our group main, we have a state here called updated photo, and the state value is just a yes or no format. We're going to change this to yes to basically say, hey, when you're ready to save, note that we have updated the picture. Okay, it's just a little flag for us. So this second step here is going off of that custom state. Only run this action when group main's updated photo is yes, the action being to replace the featured photo with whatever is in the picture uploader's value. Okay, that keeps things very controlled. You delete what you need to delete. You only save if it's necessary and you're not running any excess actions. After that, we reset our state. So updated photo goes back to a blank value. You can also say no here. And then our tab goes back to listings. We reset the group again, and we also show our alert message. The next workflow I want to walk through is this manage navigation. So when I click on this button, it's taking me to the edit view, and it's also populating content here. And that seems very straightforward in terms of just a quick screen change and passing data. However, the design is a little bit more complicated because we're coming from within a reusable element. Remember, this button is sitting inside the reusable element, not directly within the My Listings page. So we actually have to pass more information between the reusable element and the page itself, and we're going to use the help of the URL to act as this sort of in-between communicator. So here's what's happening. Let's go into the reusable element for the listings table, and let's go over to that manage button over here. Notice that this is a conditional button because we don't want this displaying on the search results or anything. This only shows if we're on the listings page, the My Listings page, and we are the owner of this listing. Okay, so what's happening when the user clicks on this button is we're actually going to navigate them back to the My Listings page. In theory, really what's happening is we're reloading the page they're already on. But we're going to pass some extra information to it in the URL through these two parameters. First thing is a listing parameter that provides the listing ID that we want to manage, right? This is the built-in unique ID for that record. And then we have another parameter for the tab that we want to go to. It just saves us a couple steps on the My Listings page to change it to a specific value there. We're going to basically say, hey, go over to this value immediately. All right, and so you can see we're sending those two parameters. So on the My Listings page, we need a workflow to respond to those parameters in the URL. So I have a pages loaded workflow that only runs if we see the listing parameter in the URL. So I'm going to rebuild this so that you can see it from scratch. You want to do get data from page URL. The parameter is going to be the word listing, and we want to say when this is not empty, just like that. Okay, so if that's the case, we'll set the state to whatever tab was in the URL. In this example, it's going to be the word edit, but this gives you the flexibility to pass different values in that if you have, many different entry points to this screen. And then we're going to display data. This is key here for editing a record. Display data gives your group a data source. That's really important. Okay, our group edit has a type of content set to listing. And there is no data source in here because the only time we're going to provide a data source is through this specific workflow so that we can change which record we want to work with. And so that's exactly what this display data action is for. It's to set the data source. So you can find that under element actions, display data. So you'll choose the element, in our case it's our group edit, and the data to display is again, get listing from page URL, make sure that you have the right parameter name that you set in the initial navigation action, that go to page action, and you set the right data type because this tells Bubble that the unique ID belongs to this table. Okay, and this is my own personal preference, but I do like to reload the page one more time without the parameters so that we don't keep them in the URL there and confuse the user or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh this page. I'm going to click on manage, and I just want you to watch the URL real quick. You'll see a little bit of a flash of that ID show up there. So manage, and it showed so briefly. It was very fast. That entire sequence that I just went through happened very, very quickly. And now we can see we're on the edit screen with this information populated. Now that the group has a data source, it makes sense for these initial contents to pull from the parent group's records, fields, title, description, image, and so on. Navigating to either the listing detail page or the user profile page is going to be very similar. So here we're inside the listing table, and we we have the title being the trigger point for navigating the user to the detail page here. So this is one where if we hover over the text, it's going to underline to let them know that they can click on it. So when we click on this text here, it's going to run a go to page action to the listing page, and the data to send is simply the current row's listing. Again, the only way you're going to get this option here is if your listing page has the type of content set to listing. Okay, so go over to the page here, and at the page level in the property editor, the type of content is set to listing. You know, you really can see if you look at the page as sort of one giant container, just like any group or pop-up can hold a data source and have a type of content, so can the page. And so this go to page with the data source is sort of the equivalent of saying display data with a group. Okay, so again, with the listing text here, when we click on it, we're navigating to the listing page, and the data to send is the current row's listing. If I go over to the reviews table, we have a very similar thing here for the user's name. Okay, so if I click on this here, and let's see here, we want to go to, yes, this one. I have two different versions. I'll explain why here in a second. But if I click on this and I'm on the listing page, then I know that I'm going to the user profile of the person who wrote the review. So user profile, and the data to send is the current row's reviews creator. You might have noticed that we're, very much taking advantage of relationships here so we can get to the data that we need. Now I do have an alternate here where instead of going to the user's profile, if we're not on the listing page, we're actually going to go to the listing itself. Why are we doing this? Because if I am in my listings, right, I'm kind of looking in my owner's dashboard, and I go into manage reviews, I've actually changed the design through conditions to look at my reviews not from the perspective of the people who wrote them. I mean, I do see their comment here, but actually from the perspective of the thing being reviewed. I think that's much more convenient for the owner to understand, these are comments made for these specific elements. We're still looking at the reviews reusable element, but we've added conditions to switch what we display in the image here and the text. Therefore, if we're on this page and I click on this text, I don't actually want to be taken to the user's profile. I actually just want to be taken to the listing page for that particular item. So that's the difference between those two workflows there. The next workflow we're going to go through is, probably the most core workflow, which is to create the review. There are a lot of different actions that happen behind the scenes to recalculate the, average rating, to add things to lists so that everything is accurate on these detail pages. So I'm going to run through just on the front end so that you have context over what's going to happen. I'm on this one listing that doesn't have any reviews right now. So if I click on write a review, we're pulling up a very simple form, very simple pop-up. The user can choose to add a photo or not. They're going to select their rating. Again, we're using another one of those repeating group designs here. Let's say I give it a rating of 4 stars, and then we're going to write a review. So I'm going to say this is made with great quality materials. Thank you, something like that. You'll also see that we're limiting the user to a certain number of characters as well. So I'm going to submit the review, and we see an alert message. We can see that this populated now. Since this is the only review, our 4-star is 100% of ratings for this particular listing. I can see this now show up. So a lot of different things happen just from that one single button click. So let's jump into that in the editor. Going to go over to the listings page, and here is my trigger to write a review. And I do technically have 2 different workflows coming off of this button because this is sort of a dual purpose. If I'm looking at my own listing, which let's go over to that holiday mug because I am logged in as Ross right now, we're going to see that button actually says manage listing rather than write a review because I don't want the user to be able to write a review for their own listing. So this is just going to trigger another one of those URL navigation systems that takes me right to the edit. Just a very quick shortcut for them there. Okay, so in normal circumstances, writing a review is going to pull up the pop-up so that they can fill out the form. And that is going to be this workflow right here. Show the pop-up, right, if we're not the owner of that listing. And then we have our submit button, which is going to map these different fields to our review record. Okay, so first action is to create the record. We are saving the comment, the actual selected rating. This is the same selection system that we used for the search filter. The related listing for the review is the pages listing. Again, remember this is a dynamic page, very similar to the user profile. Got to make sure that the type of content is set to listing. And we want to tie the review to the listing so that field will reference the page's record. We're going to default the status to published, and then the photo is going to come from the picture uploader. Okay, then we're going to update the user, very similar to when the user created a listing. We're just going to add the new review they created to their list of reviews. And then we have a few different visuals here to let them know that it went through. Reset the inputs, we'll hide the pop-up, and we'll also show an alert message. At the moment, I do have a terminate workflow just for this demonstration, but this is a great place in your sequence to send a notification. You know, when somebody sends a review, you could send an email, for example, to the owner of the listing to let them know, hey, you have a new rating, and you can provide a link to it if you want so that they can go and view it immediately, or you can just prompt them to log into their account. Okay, so this is a great opportunity for that. Now, where are we calculating the average rating and the count? Because we don't have that in this workflow here. Well, there are many different places where that rating could be affected. Whenever a flag is created, we're also going to remove that from the list of ratings and from the calculations. And if the owner decides to remove the flag, then we have to reverse it. So rather than having all these calculations happening in many different workflows where, you know, it could create a bit more error, we're going to use a backend workflow to consolidate. So in the backend workflows, we're actually taking advantage of a trigger event. So I have 3 different ones because these are the 3 different possible triggers. So we're talking about this type of backend workflow here, a database trigger. This is essentially Bubble waiting for a change to happen in your database. So the one that, you know, would have gone into effect with what we just went through here is this one. Where if a change has happened to the review table, we're going to recalculate the average rating and review count. Okay, so for your trigger event, you're going to give it an internal name. You do want to tell Bubble which table to look at. In my case, it's my review data type. And this particular backend workflow has a really unique access to the state of the record before the change and the state of the record after. So you can compare. That way you only run this when a particular change that you're looking for actually happens, and it gets ignored for any other changes that aren't relevant. So if the review record before the change is empty, and now it's not empty, then I know that the change itself is simply the creation of the record. So I'm going to make a change to the reviews related listing, and I'm going to calculate my details here. So for the average rating, I'm searching for all reviews for this listing that are not flagged, and then I'm going to go to each of those reviews ratings, right? That's a list of numbers at this point, and then get the average. Bubble has this average calculation for you, and I'm going to round it down to 1 decimal point because that's how I want them saved in the database. Very similar for the review count, searching for reviews, same constraints, and I'm going to grab each rating and count them up. Okay, and now those 2 fields will display here. It will populate my rating distribution. It will also display, you know, in my search list here within the listings table, that reusable, it's everywhere. And because we're saving those calculated values to these fields as sort of hard-coded numbers, it significantly reduces the number of searches that we have to do in real time. The last workflow we're going to look at is managing flags. So again, as a reminder, if I click on this flag icon for somebody else's review, this pop-up will show up. It'll remind me what their comment is, and I can select a reason and submit from there. So within the reviews table, I do have this icon here. And when I click on this, again, this is split into 2 different modes because if I'm looking at it from this perspective, right, on just a general listing page, I want to be able to provide the flag. But if I'm looking at my own listings screen and looking at all of the reviews coming in, let's go over to the flagged items. Clicking on this, because it's the same reusable element, should do something different. It's going to show me a different pop-up, you know, from the perspective of an owner reviewing this so that I can choose whether or not I want to remove the flag. So this one reusable element is going to have both possible pop-ups. So I have one to submit with the form, and then I also have one for the owner, as you can see my labeling here, to give them the option to remove. So clicking on the flag is going to do one or the other based on whether they are the owner of the listing or not for that review. Okay, so if they're not the owner, it's going to show the form pop-up, and it's going to display data in the pop-up so that we know which review we want to potentially flag. Because once you open up a pop-up, you've sort of lost the relationship to the rows item that you were working with, right? It's detached from that. So for submitting here, you can see that the pop-up's type of content is review, and we're just going to run a display data action, just like we have a couple of other times with, you know, setting the data source of a container. A pop-up is also a container. So we're going to send the current rows review. Okay, and so then within this, we do have our submit button. Let's take a look at that workflow right here. Submit flag. This is going to do a few things. It's going to make a change to the review, change its status to flagged. It's going to create a flag record, so we actually have documentation for it. It'll capture the other value if they decided to type in more information, right? If their reason was the word other, it'll of course capture that reason from the dropdown, which is coming from our option set, and then the relationship to the review. So we know which review this is flagging. We'll also modify the review itself to relate the flag back to the review. Now, the way that I've implemented this is that I'm really only allowing one flag at a time for the review. If you want to have, a list of flags so that it's only after a certain number does the listing get pulled, off of the public facing page, that logic is completely up to you. Just remember to keep track of your relationship so that you can implement that. And then I'm resetting the inputs so that the user can see, okay, my flag is submitted. So just a visual cue here. You can show an alert message if you want as well. Okay. And again, remember, because the flag is sort of taking it away from the ratings calculation, this is where our other database triggers come in for the backend. And so we have one for when a new flag is created. Okay, flag before change is empty, flag now is not empty. We're modifying the listing, doing those recalculations all over again. This needs to be updated to the related reviews listing. There we go. Right, the flags, reviews, listing, that's where the rating and count lives. And then removing the flag is just the opposite in the conditions. If the flag before the change was not empty and now it is, that tells us that it was deleted. So we can modify the listing. Again, this needs to be updated here. Review, listing, to recalculate them. Because the way that we're approaching the logic, and this is just our own decision, is that we don't want flagged reviews to count. We don't want them to count in the rating calculation. We don't want them to count in just the number of ratings that have been submitted. So for the owner, if they're going to remove the flag, we basically just go backwards. We reverse everything. So first thing is we're going to change the status back to published, and then we'll delete the flag. And that deletion will trigger that other backend workflow to recalculate and basically bring back, reincorporate the score for the review back into the average rating. All right, so there you have it for putting together the core functionality for a reviews application. I hope this was helpful. And if it was, definitely take a look at the content you're about to see on the next screen. It'll help you take things even further.